Welcome back. It's another episode of the Cryptid News webcast. Today we're going to get into some research, and I want to touch base on a couple topics, and I want to keep them short, sweet, and simple, and to the point. Two things we're going to discuss today. Number one, we're going to discuss habituation. It was brought to my attention. I was asked, what are my thoughts on habituation? We're going to get to that. I'm going to give a brief rundown. What exactly is habituation? What is the proper definition? And I'll break that down as simple as possible and quickly as possible. And then I want to give you a few scenarios. Like I said, I'm going to keep it short and simple. And as far as my presentation goes with habituation, I'm going to present, the pros and cons, or the ups and downs of habituation, what my opinion about habituation, what I think about it. Then it's up to you to decide if that's something you want to pursue or a process that you want to start doing. All right, it's a simple process, and as you will see very shortly, we will get into that in our first session. Okay. Secondly, into our second session, we are going to talk about male and female foot tracks. Okay, both non-human primates and primates. Okay, well, we're going to just talk about feet in general. All right, identification of feet, whether it be male or female. If a track is found, can it be identified as a male or female? Well, we're going to find out. You're going to hear what I have to say about it. And some of you have heard me speak on this before in one of my field videos. I'm going to try to give you a little bit of better, clearer explanation about where I stand on that and why we have to stop our claims. Yes, if you ever check out my videos, stop your claims. Talking about foot tracks, stop your claims. A lot of blunt claims out there. We're going to get into that too very shortly. So just want you to get relaxed, prepared, and have your ears open, listen very carefully. And if you got questions, you'll see my email posted throughout the show. So, well, let's go ahead and get started, shall we? Stay tuned. Shall we? First thing we need to talk about, what is habituation? Habituation. All right? Habituation is a study of the reaction and the research to a stimulus through observations. Keyword, observations. All right. Observations is the main part of habituating. Okay. Habituating could be a long process for anyone who is willing to start such a thing, to do it properly, and there is a safe way to do so. Alright, there's a couple different ways to go about habituating with or without food, and I'll explain that very shortly. Understanding your environment, the location or the area itself that you're trying to start the habituation is, considering all the other known wildlife and species that are in your area. Know the hazards, and when I say know the hazards, know about your predators that are in this area. A lot of habituation takes place from a long distance, and the other big key role in habituation is getting the specific species. Let's say primates, for example, okay, because some of my research on habituation comes from the study from Jane Goodall and studying with primates. And this is where a lot of my research comes from, Miss Jane Goodall, Ian Redmond. All right, these are a couple of the primatologists and the researchers that I do a lot of focus and study on. And this is where I learn a lot of my work from. All right. Well, like I said, understanding your environment and knowing the species that dwell among you. All right. Food. Like I said, we're gonna get into that. And let's use primates for example. All right, we need to understand primates. Sasquatch, okay. People say, well, Sasquatch is not a primate, he's a human. Well, humans are considered primates, okay? Shut up. Alright, I'm sorry, I can be a little blunt sometimes because I know how people think. I've dealt with enough of them to know. Well, there are people, there are humans. Okay, well, people consider primates. Alright. Just kind of bear with me here. I'm using primates as an example. Non-human primates. Alright, not human primates, non-human primates. Alright, so you want to habituate Sasquatch. Okay, why? Alright, consider the wild animals. Most wild animals fear people for good reason. Humans are the most dangerous creatures on Earth, or the planet, whatever. But there's little we could do, or there's little we could learn about the behavior of wild animals if we only see them running away. In open country, you could sit in your car with your binoculars and watch animals from afar. Alright, in parks where animals have become habituated to cars, you could sit in your vehicle, watch animals at close quarters. Some animals will even approach your vehicle because through a period of time they got used to people. Remember that little phrase, got used to people. This is all part of habituating. Alright? But in forests, which is where most primates live, there are very few roads and trees. Trees block the view from the road. So if any of you wanted to study primates or Sasquatch, you must go in their hangouts. Habituating them to your presence becomes necessary. So a lot of times when we're in the field, we're hiking, just say simple hiking or camping. When we're in the field, if they're around, you best believe they're aware of what's in their environment. They're aware of what's there. So they're studying and observing you long before you're even seeing them. Alright? Alright. Like the primatologist is much like the cultural anthropologist. He or she seeks to be accepted into a foreign society, not as a member, but as an observer. Just like a Bigfoot researcher, such as me and some of you. Alright? Primatologists strive to be ignored while they observe and record events, whether the study subjects are human or non-human. Okay, there you go. Alright. The new observer may experience a period of intense scrutiny and may receive both threatening, you hear me? Threatening, alright, and friendly behavior before being able to work with an alternate subject behavior. Alright. Let's talk about friendly or non-friendly, threatening. Alright. There's so much we don't know at all about Sasquatch. I think it's safe to say, and some may argue this with me, and that's fine. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. But I believe it's safe to say that we don't know nothing. We don't know nothing about Sasquatch. The only thing we know is what's told to us through reports in some observations that people might have witnessed through encounters, sightings, etc. Okay? And to hear the shared information, that's fine. It's all safe to take into consideration. We can't take much as fact until it's more observed. And this part here is why I say habituation is good. Okay? But you also got to consider other species among you in these areas. Alright? Now, so how does habituation work? Alright, for habituation to work, animals need to see people regularly over a long period of time. Okay? In a non-threatening, environment. For a long time, the habituated will, you might get glimpses, you might get a look, through long distance view, like through binoculars, etc., etc. Alright? For a period of time, you might not even see nothing. You may not see of nothing, you know, besides other wildlife that might be in the area. All right. So, you know, it's something you gotta be very patient when it comes to habituation. If you're gonna do it right, you need to be patient. You need to be a very patient person. You need to be able to enjoy being where you are. You need to enjoy the environment. You need to enjoy the outdoors. You know, be observant, be natural, observe other wildlife, observe the plants and the forests around you. Know the layout of the land, study the layout of the land, know what's there. Because this is something I've shared before too in my research. When you're studying a specific area, especially as far as a researcher, if you're studying Bigfoot or trying to learn about Bigfoot and research and know their, you know, understand where they come and go. If you believe you're observing findings that are related to Sasquatch behaviors, I advise you, I highly advise you, some of these tree breaks, if you could rule them out, other than being a bit from other wildlife such as bears, if you could rule them out from not being weather, observe these. But through a period of time, observe new, you know, changes into the area. Is there something coming in there that's creating more of a, you know, a destroyed environment, or what's the right way to put this? A newly additioned piece of evidence, for example, like I said, a new shelter or structure or whatever. These are other similar common behaviors of a lot of the wildlife. All right. So, all right, I want to share that this is a part where I want to talk about food. All right. A lot of times when it seems like the situation's dull, nothing's happening, a lot of our known species among us in our own woods, especially bears and deer, coyotes, wolves, all these animals have a very strong, keen sense of smell and awareness of everything that's around them. Now, food, a lot of people will use and display food to draw in the species. All right, keep in mind that food could be intercepted by any other known animal species. You could be drawing in a predator. This is where a threatening situation could develop, or a dangerous event could take place. That's something we seriously need to consider. All right. But again, back to being patient. If you're a patient person, you know, do it without food. Okay, it might take a longer time, but try to understand habituation for any animal, or you know, is not always a good thing. This is something else I want to talk about. You know, I want to talk about some of the risks of habituation. All right, if your species, if your subject has been in the area and you're observing them, all right, they can lose fear. All right, this is something you need to understand. They can lose fear of their observer, all right, or the researcher. They may also lose fear of hunters, okay, and other predators, making them easy targets. Think about that. Think about that. Does that make sense? You go into an area long enough and you spend enough time in there and they get used to you, all right, they're going to start exposing themselves to other people that may come into the area. All right, that could cause a big problem. All right, you know, a lot of primates, they reproduce slowly, you know, depending on their environment. So that's something you need to consider. Habituated primates can also be dangerous for people. When wild animals get used to eating garbage and picnic scraps, like such as bears are a good example, that are left accessible by humans, they will lose their fear of humans and can become very aggressive. Alright, so that's something you need to understand. Alright, I'm not going to get into a long drawn out thing on that there. So let's talk about healthy habituation. Healthy habituation. In primatology, All right, scientists seek to study animals without changing their behavior. All right, that's very important right there. This means habituation without, especially like food, not using no food. Habituation will take longer to study and observe to draw in your species. All right. In some cases, it could be impossible. For example, the study groups are especially wide-ranging. All right. In primate, habituation should only be attempted in areas where hunting is not a risk. Think about that, for example. Where for example, I give you one of the local parks, the Parkway here in Virginia, the Shenandoah National Parkway. All right. There's no hunting in that area. It's a very large, vast forest, very dense, and I know I've seen observed deer, and there's a lot of bears in the area, but deer, they've come in contact so much with humans from personal experience, and I know there's many others out there. I mean, I've been within an arm reach away from a lot of deer up there. There's no hunting up there. They are safe. They know they are protected. All right. So recommend these areas where habituation is more safer to take place. All right. So this is something where you want to, this is what you want to understand and consider what I just said. All right. You want to be able to ensure where people normally keep safe distance. Especially from houses, buildings, businesses, whatever, etc., etc. All right. All right. As far as finishing up habituation, well, to close on habituation, to do it properly with patience, habituation can take years. Okay? It's a long process of study and research. I recommend, like I gave you the rundown of potential hazards, dangers, to both the subject or species, of interest versus, compared to the observer or researcher themselves. I recommend not using food. Like I said, this is a process that can take a lot longer. Spending time, dedicated time in particular areas will get subjects used to you. They'll observe you. You'll start studying, especially with Sasquatch, through observations. And I think each area, each location, regardless of where you live, might be different. There might be different behaviors. A lot of common observed behaviors have been reported, but then again, it's not always guaranteed that these happenings might occur with you. But in certain areas where the subject will actually be curious to observe you, I can honestly tell you from my personal experience, curiosity was a very interesting display that I've encountered. Okay. Also, I've had a rock thrown at me. Sometimes you'll hear vocalizations. In my location where I study and focus, a lot of vocalizations are very common there. It's just usually in the later evenings. It depends on the time of year. They range from anywhere from 9 o'clock till after 1 o'clock. I've actually picked up vocalizations from recordings around the 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning hours. So, I mean, throughout the year, those kind of behaviors and stuff, activity could vary. I've been in locations where I've gone into several times and not experienced nothing. I've found things, but never experienced no activity. When I bring an extra individual, like my daughter, for example, I brought her into specific locations where I never heard or seen nothing as far as a being. But bringing her into one area before, I've actually experienced some strong vocalizations very closely. And by hearing the vocalizations that I've heard, knowing that they were very close, observing us, we were well acknowledged by the subjects of, that we were researching, that we were, studying. Well, they were there. We didn't know it till they vocalized. And you recognize the vocalization as not no other known species. it gave us an alert. It gave us the understanding that, well, okay, they're there. All right. So it takes time and dedication. I've been spending a lot of time over the years in a specific location. Take your time. If you have a passion and a desire to research Sasquatch, okay, if you have a specific location where you believe or have experienced activity there, be patient about it. Be consistent, persistent, non-stop, and be safe about it. Again, leave the food alone. Alright. If you want to present, this is one thing I recommend if you want to leave gifts, okay, non-food items, try to leave them at a higher, free-hanging, kind of, you know, like, away from other species, other animals and critters that could take them and possibly choke and cause them to become a hazard. Now, as far as one food item, I believe if you want to use food, I highly recommend a fruit such as an apple. I think it's safe to maybe possibly use an apple. Try to maybe stay away from anything that's acidic. Now, fruits, the fruit such as an apple, you could try using a vegetable. Best recommended, and I learned this is something I learned from hearing. Now, whether this be a fact or not, I've heard this from Mr. Paul Hosley, where it was a little test experiment that he's done with using, I believe, like a squash or zucchini. One was bought from a store in the produce section. One was more like more organic from a garden, non-processed without any chemicals. And the organic one, not the processed one, was actually taken. The in-store processed one was actually left alone, never touched. So that could have some truth behind it, to where, you know, animals have a sense of knowing what's what's more organic, what's non-human processed, etc. If you get my drift of what I'm getting at. But yeah, that's something I learned off of Paul Hosley, and if he's listening to this, thank you for that, Paul. Paul actually shared that information on one of our live podcasts in the past. So that's an actually interesting observation or learning tool that you might want to consider trying. So I hope some of what I discussed about the habituation, do it with patience and caution. Just be careful and consider the other known species that live there, and know the hazards. So thank you, and stay tuned for our next little session here. Hey everybody, welcome back. Let's talk about feet. Foot tracks, very commonly found among the average Bigfoot researcher. I myself could speak off a lot of experience and a lot of my findings. Now, for those who followed and viewed a lot of my field research and heard my field notes and research that I shared while out in the field, one thing I spoke specifically on was foot tracks. A lot of people claim and make statements such as, I found a female foot track. Okay, I found a male. Alright, and now let me explain why. A lot of claims when it comes to foot tracks out in the field, regardless of length, it's the width. The width plays a key role in what a lot of people make their statements on. In most cases, usually the larger, wider feet are usually associated with males, and the narrower foot is usually associated with females. One thing I made a point on, or hopefully I'll make a point here very shortly. One of the statements, and I'm only going to be on the subject very shortly here, and I think what I have to say is clear and straight to the point. When it comes to male and female feet, if we consider humans, alright, and this is one thing that you could research this yourself. A lot of there's been studies with both male and female feet. All right. As far as footwear, shoe sizes, and everything, it's been a lot of studies and stuff where, in some cases, on the human feet, there's been very little differences in most cases. A lot of times, your female on a human is narrower on a female human being. And one of the key factors that plays a role in this here is the shoe wear, the footwear that's worn, because through different studies and observations with the human feet, most females, not all, but most, actually will use a narrower, smaller shoe based off of the fashion wear and the shoe, to go with their style. But then on the other hand, other observations and studies with the human feet, it's more and more common for females to actually wear size between 10 and 11 in most cases in a men's size shoe. All right, in the men's size, in men's shoe size, a size 11, 10 to 11 is a very common shoe size with most average males. They range, give or take, a couple sizes. Through a lot of my observations in human feet, one of the things I found is I've seen 6 foot men that are 6 foot tall, okay, slightly slender, wearing anywhere from a size 9 to a size 12 or 13. Okay, and this is also on research and studies through different observations done on online studies. All right. Well, one thing I want to point out, all right, in primates or anybody, such as we could use primates, we could use people in Africa who do not wear shoes. A lot of times, without having a shoe to actually form our feet from a young child, up to our present state. For people who haven't worn shoes, your feet's going to be a little bit more wider splayed. All right, that could vary. That could be both male or female. A lot of times, the feet could be longer and narrower, depending on height. All right, height, weight, and age plays a serious key factor in your foot. The heavier the subject, the wider the foot could be. All right, the taller the subject, the narrower the foot could be. Depends on, these are key factors and key points. Your height, your weight, okay? Height and weight, and age. Age is a very lower factor, but your main two are actually your height and your weight. This will play a key role in the size of your foot, the width and length. All right. Something to take in consideration. I could display a few feet up here, all right, without showing you who they belong to, what they belong to. Would you be able to identify them? All right. Maybe, maybe not. A lot of times when we make our statements, especially when we're out in the field making claims about, I found a female track, I found a male track, these are just assumptions, or what I call assumed guesses. There's no fact in them. There's nothing to hold fact on the statements or claims that we make on some of the tracks that we find, because the majority of the time, a lot of these tracks are misidentified. All right, that's the first step, is a misidentification of tracks. All right, so this is something we need to consider. Stop making claims. Okay, you find a foot track in the woods. Okay, great. Good finding. Good observations. All right, but we're making claims that we have no proof on. And back to the research and the study that was online. The quote part of the study observations. Foot length was 15.36% of the body height in men, and 15.1% of the body height in women. All right, while this was a statistically sufficient difference, all right, the absolute difference is very small. For a 5'6" man and woman, the difference in foot length would be less than a quarter inch. That's not saying much. Foot width was 6% of body height in men and 5.87% of body height in women. Again, the absolute difference is very small. A 5'6" man and woman, the difference in foot width would be less than 1/10 of an inch. Yes. And as you see displayed, this is part of the study right here. I actually displayed it right here for you. Alright, this is one of the studies I've done. And, well, not one I've done, but this was a online graphical, you can see right here that it shows a graphical display of the results, alright, from the gentleman, Wunderlich, shows that the women in the group studied appear to have a tighter variation in foot length. So length is more common in a female versus a male with the height and the weight. So width, there's actually no distinct variation or width that we could make our claims on saying, oh, that's a woman's foot or that's a men's foot. Okay. And every woman and male child, your height is simply, it all depends on your height. It depends on your weight. These are key factors that depend on the width of the foot. So when you find a wide foot, it could be a female. If you find a narrow foot, it could be a male. It could go either way. Alright? So there's no concrete evidence pointing or suggesting that a narrow foot track is a female. Your assumed guess is only an assumption. Alright? And I think I make my point clear. There's no evidence to support a narrower foot being in female. Again, it's an assumed guess, not a fact. That's all I really want to say about this. I don't want to really get into a long, drawn-out explanation. If you don't want to take my word for it, I'm not going to fight and argue with you. I just take the time to do my studies. I made these statements before, but I do use research to back up or support, better safely to say, support my statements for what I'm presenting to you. I'm not an expert in feet, dermal ridges, etc. Nothing. I do a lot of intense, in-depth studies of primates. I use the knowledge that I learn off of them in comparison to what many observe and find in the field, and I'm using that towards my research to help me better understand what we might have among us. Despite the observations of identifications or descriptions of subjects that are found or observed in the field, I've heard both human features, I've heard primate, our known primate features. So there's no concrete evidence pointing towards one or the other. Through observations through a number of people, and I'm going to use my own statement here, this is my own, through my own observations, I find more to relate towards primates. Okay? I'm not saying Sasquatch is one of our known primates. Alright? I believe he's a species within himself, but that falls into the primate family. I clearly believe and state that they are a ape of some sort. Okay? What kind of ape? We don't know. Alright? That's up to the discovery to be acknowledged and science to actually open that up to us. So, with that being said, I hope what I had to share with you might give you a different mindset to understand a little bit differently. It might get you thinking. My presentations are for you to draw your own conclusions out of. Okay? If you have any other questions, please email me at the email that you see listed below. And stay tuned for other discussions. We got some more coming up, and we've actually have some people that want to participate in this. So, and also there's live podcast shows coming up with we have guests that are lined up. So keep an eye out for them. If you haven't done so, you got to subscribe to this YouTube channel so you don't miss out. Because when we do go live, when the YouTube channel ECBRO 98, when we go live, you will get the notification that we're live, so you could jump in and watch us, and you can interact with us through the live chat below. So I want to thank you guys again for tuning in, listen to my research presentation, and what I had to say is based off of research and studies that I've conducted. Alright, and what I share to you as far as my opinion is not fact, it's only opinion. But my opinions are based off of my research and my studies, and I advise you to start doing your own. Because if you want to start studying a Sasquatch, you need to find what you believe is the closest related subject species to that being, for you to start understanding and stop making your assumed guesses. Okay? Because assumption without fact is your folly. God bless.